Hi everyone, welcome to the Business in Calgary podcast powered by Sonic Coaching. I'm your host, Oliver Basner. I'm excited today. I've actually got a guest that some of you will probably recognize. I'm sitting here with Robert Hayes, President and CEO of Calgary Sports and Entertainment Corporation. Now, if you're not familiar with CSEC's brands, let me go through them with you. So that includes the Calgary Flames, Calgary Stampeders, Calgary Hitmen, Calgary Roughnecks, and the Calgary Wranglers. So first of all, Robert was on the cover of Business Calgary's magazine May edition last year in 2025. So first of all, congratulations, Robert, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And I have to correct you. We have the 5 teams, but we also have live entertainment. And my live entertainment team would be very upset if I didn't get that plug in
If
there.
you didn't mention it.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
So that's great. Yeah, and lots of great live entertainment. I've been down for a bunch of it over the last few years. So. Excellent. So, let's jump right in. You didn't start off your career in sports. So, you started in finance. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that transition, and has it been everything you've sort of expected?
I'd be happy to. It's a question I get quite regularly. I'm sure that's not a surprise. I spent a lot of years in the banking industry dealing with for the last 21 years, I guess, before I took this role, Calgary companies. And I love dealing with companies, dealing with people, being out in the communities, doing those sorts of things. And this opportunity honestly came out of the blue, was quite unexpected. I was enjoying the job that I was doing, but I knew the organization through the 3 of the 4 owners that I knew well.
Right.
And said to the headhunter, I'm happy to do it. I'm not the 40-year-old you're looking for, but happy to put my hat in the ring. And after a little while, they said, we think you'd be the right person to take us forward and to help us complete the construction of the facility and continue growing the business in the way that Ken King and John Bean have done great things with over last 25 plus years, I guess, that they've been in there, and to try to carry the torch forward that those gentlemen did such a good job with. So that was the reason that I said yes, because I thought it was an exciting opportunity. When you look at Scotia Place and what's being built there, who wouldn't want a chance to be involved in something as new as that? And then I like to tell people we're the stewards, the business part of the organization for the 5 teams and the live entertainment groups that come in. And I love sports, like entertainment in general, but I love sports. So it just seemed like a perfect job, quite frankly, to step into. Now, in answer to your question, I think you said, what's different, or what didn't you expect?
Is it all that you expected, or maybe what didn't you expect, right? So
I think it's all that I expected and more. I had heard and I knew, because I had been involved with some of the folks, that they had a great team there. So that was absolutely as expected. It's so nice to walk into an organization where you have a tremendous team, the leadership team, all the people that work there, the hours and the dedication that they put in is simply incredible. So really nice to get an organization that is running, as I say, on all cylinders. And then what we look to do as we move forward was, what do we really need to focus on? We really need to focus on getting into that new building and making it work for all the citizens of Calgary and Southern Alberta. But more importantly than that, even over the next 2 years, when I started, a little over 2 years ago, a little over 18 months ago, we have to make sure that we're honoring the Saddle Dome, and that it's going to be something where people can think back. I was here when the Olympics were on. I was here when it was built. I was here when Lanny McDonald and the guys raised the cup in 1989, when that great 03-04, that's when I moved here in 03-04 happened, and all those sorts of things. And so we're coming up with a lot of stuff over the next season that you'll see, where we really want to pay honor, as I say, to the Scotiabank Saddle Dome and all the great things that it's done. And then we have to move, as our building operations person says, from your really lovely 20-year-old Ford, where you know every nook and cranny of it, into an F1 Ferrari, and we got to figure it out all over again. So that's the challenge that we have. So it has truly been everything and more than I expected, to answer your question.
Well, that's great. Great to hear. It's always nice when you can make that move and really enjoy the move as well. And when you talk about the team, you just brought back a memory for me, because prior to your days, back in the Ken King days, and I actually worked with the sales team for the Calgary Flames and did some coaching and helped them move forward and obviously improve conversion rates. So you're right. Great team, great sales team. All the people I talked to there, were super supportive and willing to help and do whatever it needed to sort of be done to move things forward. So
Yeah, it's amazing the linkage that you just described there. I mean, what do we say? There's 6 degrees of separation supposedly in the world. I think in Calgary there's about 2 degrees of separation. I can't tell you how many people I have met who are in the mid or further on stages of their career. Yeah. I work for the Calgary Flames and did this, and this, and it's an organization that has really been a launch pad, I guess, for a lot of kids. I say kids at the time who were in their teens or going through university and wanted that summer job or that interim job. And I think the organization does a great job of putting people through that, and they become advocates for you when you move forward.
Yeah, we're the smallest big city in Canada, right? And you've heard that before, and
Yep.
I totally agree. And it's funny you say that because I know I've said it often. I said that two parts of separation. I said this to a client of mine once. I said, really, you know somebody that knows the mayor, quite closely, and could get you an introduction. He says, well, actually, that's me. So there you go. I was one part away, right? So, or 2 parts away, I guess we could say, right? So
very true. And to build on that I'll go back to my banking days from a business perspective. I used to tell people in other parts of the country about Calgary and how enjoyable it is to do business, in my case, when you're financing businesses. But it was getting that introduction, and I explained to people that if you wanted to meet somebody, all you had to do was find that connection, and they would open the door, because the mentality, I think, of Calgary and Alberta for that matter, but Calgary even more so, is that we want to grow that pie even bigger from an economic perspective, which we then can have all the social programs that we need to continue to make the city as good as it is. And I think since I have lived here, and I worked here in this market for probably 3 or 4 years before that, so call it 25 plus years, I don't think there's any other city, certainly in the Western world, that I know of that's quite like it.
No, that's great. I completely agree. Now, question for you. What's been the biggest surprise since you took the top job?
I would say, and this I don't know if it's biggest surprise, I have to word this properly, the passion with which people follow the sports teams. And I'm a huge sports fan. I was admittedly, Flames were not my first choice, so people know this. I had another team that I cheered for because I was from the East Coast. So
okay, I won't end the interview on you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
I grew up on the East Coast as well.
Okay, so you probably cheered for somebody else in your early days as
yeah.
well. But when you come here and the team goes out and performs well, how excited people get. And then the opposite, when the team maybe stubs their toe and has a stumble of some sort. And I'll talk specifically about the Calgary Stampeders. So I came into this role, and the Stampeders were just probably about a quarter or third of the way through 2 seasons ago.
Right.
And 2 seasons ago was the worst record they had in, I think, plus or minus 20 years.
I remember that. It was horrible.
Hadn't made the playoffs for the first time, I think it was in 18 or 19 years, and pretty downtrodden.
It hurt.
And so, yeah, I heard from people who are longtime fans, what are you going to do to fix it? And, to the point where I think they seemed to think that I caught touchdown passes or threw touchdown passes or ran punts back or something. But it was the passion with which they spoke about it, and they wanted to change. And I give full credit to Dave Dickinson, Jay McNeil, John Huffnagel when he was still here with us. They put a plan in place, and we were, we say internally, and I think Dave has admitted to this, I don't want to quote him, but we were 2 plays away from potentially getting to the Grey Cup. That BC game was very, very close, and it was just unlucky bounces that happened, but that's the game of sport and why we play the game of sport at the end of the day. But so really pleased and proud to see the incredible work that the team put into it. And then to be able to go back to some of my friends to answer your question, the biggest surprise, and say, I told you, just trust us, we'll put a plan in place. Because I pulled out a chart probably halfway through the year, and it was TSN, I think, rankings of where teams were going to finish. Calgary was dead last in everybody's ranking. And at that particular time, we were the #1 ranked team in the league. We didn't quite get there at the end of the season, but really, really a lot of fun. So I'd say I knew the fans were passionate, but the surprise with the passion and what you hear from people, both mostly on the good side, but on the tough side as well, that surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It sort of makes me wonder too, because in your role, you've got a team, right? A big team to make things happen, right? And so when things are going well, I'm guessing there's lots of energy, enthusiasm, people are excited, as far as your employees, right? And so what happens when the teams are losing and they're not doing well? How do you keep that motivation up?
I think from an internal perspective, we have the benefit that we have, as you said, 5 teams.
Right.
So if a team is maybe having a little bit of difficulty, there's other teams that probably pick it up, and we all cheer for every team in the organization as opposed to picking a favorite, I would suggest. So that's one thing that probably makes the ebbs and flows a little more balanced when you have the wins and losses. What we do from a business perspective, and this is where business and sport kind of combine each other, I think, is what's the plan that we have in place? And if things aren't going well, it's no different than any of the businesses that we have in this city. We're going to have to change something because we all know the definition of insanity if you don't change something.
Sure.
So what has to change? You know, in some cases, we have to adjust the culture. You know, we have to change that a little bit, and that can be as simple as some of the things that you might do for the organization,
right,
in making it a better place for players to come, for coaches to be attracted to. Maybe it means you have to change out some coaches and some people. Maybe you have to change out some players from that perspective, but probably starts with that. And then you have to look at, I would say, those key positions that you have. So if I look at football again, everybody's important. We know that those linemen, offensive and defensive linemen, you know, that's the blocking and tackling, no pun intended, that makes a team great. But you need those players who are going to make those super skilled plays as well. And so we went out and determined we need some of these players and got the Vernon Adams Juniors of the world and some of the receivers of the world. Our defensive backs, which struggled 2 seasons ago, we changed that whole group, and it was incredible what they did this year. And I think it's the same on the hockey side. You know, we made a trade recently that was a very difficult trade for, I think, the team to make. I didn't speak with the player, but I'm sure the player found it difficult to leave after spending his whole career here. But the reality is that he wanted to move on. We saw an opportunity to do some things, and so we moved on, and we wish him the best. And I think in the long run, it will be, you know, time will tell, but it's going to be better for Calgary Flames. But we'll see. In the short term, we lost a pretty darn good player, but as I said, you know, relating it back to the business community that we're talking to here to some extent, I always like to take the glass half full. You know, when one door closes, there's got to be a couple doors that open somewhere along the way. So if a player leaves that is a valuable player, chewing up lots of minutes, as I think that player did, there's an opportunity for other people to step in and say, I'm going to, you know, pull up the bootstraps or skates a little tighter, I guess, lace them up, and go out and do a little more. So I think business and sport are very similar from that perspective.
Excellent. You know, you've got the 5 great sports teams, right? In addition to that, you manage, you know, the Scotiabank Saddle Dome. You know, obviously you're highly involved in the new event center as that's getting built. You know, you've got the retail operations, you've got real estate. There's a lot going on. You've got the entertainment portion. Let's not forget them. I don't want to forget them as well. Like, how do you ensure flawless execution? I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot going on in your organization. Yeah. So, you know, and our listeners are probably wondering too, like, how does he get that all done?
So the second answer to the question, you know, what I think you said, what surprised you, or something along that lines. I would say the complexity of it, and you know, business has its complexities in any business that you're in relative to the functional groups. But you layer on that intense fan base. I like the joke that every Flames game, I have 18,000 people that are in the stands judging whether we're doing a good job on food and on parking and on clearing the snow if it's a snowy day, let alone the product on the ice and that sort of thing. So we have, we've got, like any other business, functional teams. They roll up to great leaders. Everybody knows what the process is for any particular event. So whether it's a concert that's going on, it's a lacrosse game that's going on. It might be a breakfast for one of our players that support a certain charity, those sorts of things. Everybody knows what it is. We've got pretty good process from a, you know, written down perspective, and I'm a believer in that let's have a process and a plan, and we'll go execute on it. And that's what the team does. They execute flawlessly. And I think the best example of that is if you have a Calgary Wranglers game on a Friday night, you've got a Calgary Roughnecks game on a Saturday, and you've got a Calgary Hitmen game on a Sunday, and you've got to turn that ice twice. And people, you know, go to the Wranglers game, show up the next day for a lacrosse game, and they probably don't take note of the fact that there's been a group working for 6 to 8 hours overnight to get that thing all done and turned over and ready for a lacrosse game the next day, and then the same thing repeat all over again the next night in order to get it ready for a hockey game that afternoon, so we can have 10,000 kids come in, or 18,000 kids for teddy bear toss night or
Right.
something like that. So there's all of that aspect of it from a logistics point of view that we have to do. Then we have what I'll call our marketing and our event calendar. And so this lays out for everybody, quite frankly, over the next 12 months, as much as we know what's going to happen over the next 12 months, this is what to expect. So within the organization, people know that the month of January is a really heavy month for hockey. It's
Right.
heavy because the NHL is going on Olympic break, so we have a lot of NHL games, but we had our Wranglers team that had the most games on the road early in the season, so that has to catch up somewhere. So we have a lot of Wranglers games as well. So people are going to know it's going to be probably long hours, a lot of evenings over the course of January, and you have to adjust a little bit to that and just be ready for it at the end of the day. I did a town hall not too long ago. Sorry, we call it home team huddle, not town hall. So
Okay.
we did a home team huddle the other day and shared some of the things that go through my mind relative to what keeps me up at night and what have you. And one of the things I had up there are the CSEC employees having fun. And I think that's important, that we're asking people to work crazy hours in this business, that's for sure. But they have to be able to go home at the end of the day and say that I'm really still having fun. I enjoy this job, I enjoy this company. And we get a little bit of that because we are stewards for the city. We're sports and entertainment at the end of the day.
Right.
It's kind of a fun place to be working in. I can tell you that now firsthand.
Perfect. You heard it here first. It's a fun place to work. Not only a fun place to go, watch entertainment and watch sports, right? So now let's talk a little bit about the event center. As you and I spoke before we got on air, Jeff McKegg and I spoke last year, and he gave us a little bit of a teaser, and it was interesting to talk to him about sort of some of the things going on there. One of the things he said was the washrooms will be adaptable, right, based on the crowd. So that was, wow, that's fascinating, right? And I know that you've taken some ideas from some of the best event centers all over North America, right? Toured them, and had a look on and sort of picked the best from what you saw. Can you give us some teasers? What can the fans expect?
So I'm under pressure here now because Jeff, of course, is one of 4 bosses I have, so I have to make sure I'm consistent with what he said. But I'll start with the washrooms, and that's because last week on Thursday I met with a bunch of business leaders, and a few of them are from Edmonton, and they're asking about Scotia Place, and we talked about washrooms, and they said, oh my goodness, please don't tell me you're doing what we did up in Edmonton, because Edmonton, I understand, didn't go so well.
Right.
And the washrooms were a great idea by Susan Darrington, who is our Chief Venues Officer, and she has opened 4 other facilities around the world. And when she was at one of those facilities, she came up with an idea, or they came up with an idea, why don't we have these flex washrooms? So we actually have 40% men, 40% traditional female washrooms.
Right.
And then the other ones can flex back and forth. And believe it or not, hockey games are a challenge for sure, when everybody after the first or second period has a few beers and they have to take care of business. But if you have a country music concert and you're not ready for 12,000 women who show up for that concert,
you're in trouble.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, that's for sure, when you have the break between the first and second act. So we're really pleased with that. So that was one of the things that we learned from somebody who we had on the inside, which was great. I think the other things we learned are sports fans, entertainment fans are looking for different options. And so when you take the Saddle Dome now, you can go kind of anywhere at any time in the Saddle Dome.
You can.
When you get to the new facility, we will have what I'll call segmented areas, if you will. So we're trying to make it so that the person who says, I don't want a suite, but I still want entertainment for my client, we have loge tables, so you can get 4 seats there. Or we have theater boxes, so you can have 6 seats plus a table there. Or we have a couple of clubs that we're going to have our, the blue line to blue line, if you will, north and south clubs. What I really loved was our Jeff and the ownership group listened when we were talking to them about the size of some of these clubs, and we went to visit 5 or 6 other stadiums when I took the job. What we noticed was they had really nice clubs, but they were crowded. And people have decided that I'm willing to pay for an experience that is slightly different than just going and sitting in a seat. I want to be able to walk to a club and have a little food and have a little room on my own and know that it is an area that is just going to be me and the club members.
Right.
And so the owners stepped up and they supported us making these a little bigger, which I think is terrific from that perspective. The other thing that we learned was food and beverage is becoming that much more important for people. So, you think when we grew up in the old hockey stadiums that you went into where it was a hot dog and hamburgers and greasy fries that came out of the vat or something like that, people now want lots of choices.
They do.
And right across the gamut. And we're very fortunate we control our own food and beverage. And so we're going from a building where, I'm not sure this is 100% correct, but plus or minus, we have a commissary, for lack of a better term, where we cook about 90% of our product that goes to all the concessions. So we only have cooking ability in about 10% of the concessions. In the new building, it's going to flip on its head, and you're going to have about 90% of the concessions that have cooking capability. So what we'll be able to deliver in a fresher fashion, in a faster fashion, and if the public says we don't like this, we can flip it out just like that, which is nice. So lots more food and beverage options. A big thing that people are going to notice from a difference perspective, and I wouldn't say this is anything we learned, it's the way buildings are built now, is a double concourse. So of course the Saddle Dome now is one concourse,
Right.
and you have, say, 15,000 people that are going onto that concourse. We will now have two concourses. So the lower bowl concourse will service 8,000 or 9,000 people, and the upper bowl will service the rest at the end of the day, and the suite level will be in between.
Right.
And so everybody will have lots of room to move around because the concourses are going to be wider than a traditional concourse that we would have seen at the Saddle Dome. And I think people are really going to appreciate all they can do to walk around. That gives us an opportunity then to do more from an activation perspective relative to our great partners and sponsors that we have who want to do more with the client base that we have. It'll allow us to do, what we're still trying to figure it out, but we're going to have some sort of a I don't know what's the term. I don't know if Hall of Fame is the right term, but something to talk about the Saddle Dome, something to talk about the history of the Olympics, history of the Flames, those sorts of things. These are the types of things that the ownership group has challenged me and my leadership team on, is what do we want the building to look like when that person walks in, whether it's from Calgary and they're seeing something different even though they've been there 10 times before, or they're coming from another part of Canada and they want to take a tour of the facility, because that's what we would love. People say, I want to see this new facility and see what it's all about. Then you get into the whole sports side of it and the guts of it that most people don't get to see. We have pretty basic facilities that, again, people would walk in and say, this is not a whole bunch different than the dressing room I grew up playing hockey in 40 or 50 years ago. And so we're trying to up our game from that perspective relative to athletes who really keep themselves in incredible shape. So what can we do from a cardio perspective? What can we do from a weight training perspective? What can we do from hot tubs and cold tubs and those sorts of things, so that we can be a place where athletes want to come from a destination point of view because they know they're going to be treated the best, which in turn means we have a better product on the ice, on the lacrosse floor, whatever the case may be. And then obviously we have better results and the fans are happy. So it becomes that sort of evolving circle, if you will. So those are the few of the things that we're trying to do that are a little bit of a differentiator. I do joke, however, though, and Susan, our chief venues person, has agreed with me. We're going to open the building, Oliver, and 5 minutes after we open it, we're going to say, oh my gosh, here's 25 things we should have done. And that's just the nature of the beast, that you can't plan for everything. But I think, and I give all credit to John and the team before me, they did an amazing job at coming up with the schematics of what the building should look like by taking the best of many others they've been to.
Well, I know Calgary's excited, and I'm pretty sure the province is excited too. So I think everybody's kind of waiting. So thanks for some of those teasers, I guess. And I have heard something, so I want to confirm it with you. Tell us about the angle of the seats.
So the angle, pitch, whatever you wish to call it, of the seats. So I describe it as a traditional stadium goes more out than up.
Right.
We're going to go pretty steep up, and that was another one by design. We went to see Detroit, and if anybody's been to Montreal, it's very similar. And those stadiums go up, particularly in the upper bowl, and they go up steeply because we want to make it a very difficult place for opposing teams, lacrosse, hockey, whatever the event happens to be, to play from a loudness perspective. Because it's been proven, when people are getting jeered or cheered, they either play worse or better depending on which team it is that you're jeering or cheering at the time. And so we want to make it so that in that, the attack end, the first and third period where we're shooting on, it's really loud on that goaltender, and they know that watching every move, every play they're making. So I think that's going to be very cool. The upper bowl is an interesting one. When I was in visiting Detroit Stadium, you walk into through the Valm, I think they're called, into the upper bowl, and you have to climb 12 or 14 sets of stairs in order to get to the top row. And it's a fairly steep pitch, as I say. So one of the things, again, the folks who came before me thought was, well, why are we putting the upper concourse there? Why don't we put it halfway up? So it's going to be kind of cool. When you walk into that upper concourse, you're going to go down 5 or 7 rows to your seat, or you're going to go up 5 to 7 rows. And we were really trying to think through, what does the fan want? What makes it a better experience for the fan?
Makes total sense.
And something as simple as that we learned from the folks in Detroit is, if we did it all over again, we don't want people walking 15 rows up and 15 rows down. So I think it's really well thought out from that perspective.
Well, I don't want to, I want to be there when Edmonton's in town and there's that wall of red, with the pitch being the way it is and the intimidation factor. That's going to be amazing.
Yes. Just a short yes on that one.
That's great. Can't wait. Yeah. So, so much going on there. So I know I'm excited to see it, and I know, there's a lot of people in Calgary who can't wait for the, for the new facility.
Well,
so.
and you talk, if I may, you've talked about the interior. We've talked about the interior quite a bit. I think what's really going to be a cool factor as well is when people from the city, but I always say outside the city, come and look at the stadium. The outside cauldron, it's going to be a cauldron that can go multicolor. On a Flames night, it's going to be flaming red that you see, and orange and that sort of thing. From that perspective, but we can change it to all different colors. The activation places that we have outside, all of our restaurants, we learned again this from some of the other places we went to visit, are going to be outside the stadium, or outside accessible, if you will, 365 days a year, because we want to tie into that Stampede Trail and make it a real activity hub, if you will. Lots of room when you walk in the gates of the stadium for congregation areas outside of even the concourse level itself, where you can socialize and do the business community things, and I'll meet you at such and such a place. We have a community arena, which I think is just a great idea that we had. First of all, because I think it's going to be tremendous for the community. I've often said my dream is to get, whether it's Esso Minor Hockey Week or City Championship Week that happens in the community arena. I think that would be pretty cool. And maybe Flames players take a stroll down and see some of these kids playing. But it will also allow us to have training facilities right there for the hockey team. So if you have a lacrosse game going on and you've got your floor covered, well, the teams just walk down and go in the community arena from a practice perspective. So I think it's going to be a special building from an outside as well. The city have been amazing partners. We've partnered with a lot of the Indigenous communities around here to make sure that they're represented very well. So I think, again, the bases are covered so well from a proud Calgarian perspective with what the end result is going to be.
Yeah, and a wow factor, sounds like, as well, a massive wow factor, even before you get in that building, which is going to be amazing. And of course, as you said, as soon as you open the doors, you're going to go, how did we miss that, that thing, right? But that's okay.
It'll happen, so, yeah.
Well, we're always getting better, right? So
absolutely. We never reach perfection. We're always trying to just get a little better, business and sport.
Now, I want to jump into some learnings that you've had. So when it's kind of a couple of questions I ask all the folks that I interview. So the first one is, what do you wish somebody would have told you when you started your leadership journey?
So not just here, but you're talking leadership
in general, yeah. What would you tell your younger self? What would that advice be to that young listener out there that's on the beginning of their journey? What would you say?
I would say probably find mentors faster than I did. I was very fortunate that I had some good mentors along the way who could probably catch me when I'm about to fall, but push me at the right time. But if I would have found more faster, I think you could have accelerated your growth from a leadership perspective if you did that. Find those great leaders, or more great leaders, because I had some great leaders, but more great leaders as I was going through my career journey. I was very fortunate in that I remember my very first leadership role, and I had an individual who worked for me, and they walked in my office one day and they closed the door, and I could sense that, okay, this is going to be a serious conversation, and they sat down and they said, we have to have a talk. And I said, okay. And they said, you need to let us do our job. And I looked at him and I said, I don't understand. What do you mean you need to let us do your job? You've been promoted to a leadership position. So focus on strategy, focus on leadership. You're not the person dealing with the client every day. It was a client-facing role that this individual had. let us do our job. And it was one of the greatest pieces of coaching up advice that I ever had, that you have to trust that the people you have hired and that are in place are going to be amazing people and do amazing things for you. So set direction, set strategy, set guidance, and clear all the hurdles out of the way so that those people can be successful. And guess what? Your business is going to be successful in the long run as well. So I guess it goes full circle. Great mentors from above and great mentors from below from that perspective.
Of course, we can always learn from below as well.
Yeah.
Well, and then I'll add my 3 favorite words. Anybody that's ever worked with me or for me knows my 3 favorite words are trust but verify, right?
Yes.
So, great leaders know how much to trust and verify. I mean, some people you need to trust but verify more often than others. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's back to what you said earlier, which is, how do you manage all those moving pieces that you're responsible for? It's by having great leadership.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that I've learned, that you have no choice. You have to let go the higher up you go in an organization, simply because you can't have your hands and your pulse on everything that's happening on the front lines every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody who possibly could either, so you're correct. You put terrific leaders in place in anticipation that they're in turn going to put terrific leaders below them, and then ultimately frontline workers in place, and the rest takes care of itself. Quite frankly, it all comes back to people, and that would be another lesson that I think I learned early on. Nobody likes to fire people, but when you see somebody who is a problem employee and it's just not going to work out, I learned the hard way. You need to fire fast and you need to hire slow and be methodical. And I did the second part, I think, really well, but the first part we all probably have deep in our heart,
right.
the belief that I can resurrect this person and they're going to be great. And I think maybe as leaders we drag along a little longer than we should, and just having to make that difficult decision and moving on.
Completely agree. If you knew how many leaders I've coached and worked with over the years who said, boy, I sure wish I would have made that tough decision 6 months ago and 12 months ago, right? It's so much better now, right? And so thanks for that. Yeah, it's a great reminder.
Yeah.
Now, the other question I always ask is, my philosophy is that personal development and professional development are really one and the same. And so, what's a book or something that, in terms of even a tool that you've found that's been helpful, for the professional development side?
So professional development, I love taking courses, and I was very fortunate in my financial career. The organizations that I worked for sent me away on a lot of courses just to learn different things. Some with people that were peers within your organization, but I often found the best ones were when they were with people who were external from the organization, just because you had new ideas to learn from. So I'm a huge proponent of that. If your company comes to you and says, we want to send you away to learn something, go do it for sure. From a book perspective, I've read bits and pieces, I would say, of a lot of books, but probably my favorite of all time is one that my dad gave me. My dad knew nothing about business. He was a general practitioner, doctor, but he knew that I was going to get into business and banking early on, and he gave me a book called Swim with the Sharks. And
Great
I don't
book.
even think you can buy it now, so you know it.
I know
and,
it.
Harvey McKay?
Harvey
McKay.
McKay, yeah.
And when you read through that, and he had 2 of them, but you read through the first one, and all the little things that he did, and I took some of his tricks of the trade from a client perspective. And I always remind people in an organization that I work with, clients being fans interchangeably, if you will, that we only have a job as long as we have clients at the end of the day when you're in business. So you better figure out a way to really to make a relationship, to tie in with that client. And I think that book, Swim with the Sharks, had so many really cool ideas that might seem a little hokey, but they work because you're going that extra mile to show the client that you really value their business, that you want their business at the end of the day. And he did a great job of asking for the business. That was a frustrating thing that I used to see with some people who would work on my teams. They did, their pitch was brilliant and they knew everything inside out, and then they stopped.
Scared to ask.
And they didn't tell the client. So I want your business because I'm going to be the best at whatever it is I'm going to do for you. So I think that was probably my favorite book of all time that I read from a business point of view. Other things that I read, I read the Harvard Business Journal on a regular basis, and just articles on that to keep up with. I love organizational theory, organizational behavior, whatever you're going to talk about it, just learning and keeping up to date with that as organizations evolve. And I think the next thing is going to be AI, and how's that going to impact organizations. I'm not sure if we figured it out, but there's always something new that's coming on from an organizational perspective that, if an organization is like a person, it just continues to evolve and grow and change, and to try to stay, I don't know if you can stay ahead of the curve in this day and age, that's tough, but at least to stay up with the curve.
Yeah, at least not fall behind the curve.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect. Well, we could keep chatting probably for another half hour to an hour here, but we're sort of getting close to the end of time, and I sort of have one kind of final question, that I've been wondering about. We're in 2026. I mean, it's amazing how many people this year are talking about it's the year of the horse, right? And I don't usually follow the zodiacs and what year it is, but I've had more than one client now in business say it's the year of the horse. I'm ready to go because the vision of the horse is let's go, right? And so we're in the year of the horse. It's 2026. What excites you about 2026?
Well, now that you say that, it reminded me the Stampede's going to be pretty exciting. It's the year of the horse, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
What scares me, though, is I didn't go, but one of my coworkers went to the Lunar New Year celebration last year. And long story short, I have a snake in my office because, of course, it was the year of the snake.
Right.
And I'm a little worried what's going to come in my office this year if they go to the Lunar New Year. So it's not quite big enough to fit a horse in.
Not to scare you anymore, but I was talking to somebody earlier today, and it's actually the year of the fire horse, which only happens every 58 or 60 years or something. So who knows what's going to be in your office, right? I mean, you do manage the flames as well, right? So.
Well, you think of Blasty. I mean, there you go, the horse that breathes fire right there. So maybe we're destined that we're going to surprise people the rest of the year and into next year. You talk about the year of the horse, and what I think of is if we can speed up, and I don't know how we do that.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to have to do to keep up, because we have to, as I say, go through Saddle Dome and make this a place where people are going to come, if we're just talking Flames only, 41 nights a year next year, and they're going to expect something special, and we have to figure out how to do that. And then when we get into the new building, they're going to expect something special to kick it off and start it. And that's another item that Jeff McKagan and his ownership peers have put in my job jar. How are you going to make this a spectacular opening? And then moving right into the new building. And that's going to be a speed up process because we have to educate a whole fan base there. We have a building, as I alluded to earlier, where you can kind of go anywhere and do anything. In the new building, it's going to be different. I mean, there's going to be certain entrances that you go into for these clubs, and certain entrances that are general admission, and how come I can't get there, and I want to go over here. So it's going to be an education process from that point of view. But that's not lost on us, and that's the change management that we have to do as an organization to help all of our fans, as I say, have a great experience. And I'll close on this, if I may. I got to go to meet Commissioner Bettman at NHL headquarters in New York, and he said there's two things that you cannot screw up in this job. And I kind of looked at him, and he said, one is the Sea of Red. He said every other NHL team, and he said I would guess every other sports team would just die to what you guys have in Calgary, where you have fans that show up consistently with those red jerseys on, and it's just incredible because you don't see it in other places. And I said, and the second one, he said, you only have one chance to make a first impression in this new building. Don't bleep it up.
Yeah, and we don't have to bleep that out because you did it for me. Well, that's an excellent way to finish. So thank you so much for for the tidbits of the nuggets around business, but also for a few of the secrets that maybe the fans weren't aware of around the new event center. So
my pleasure.
Enjoyed chatting with you. So you've been listening to the Business in Calgary podcast, powered by Sonic Coaching, and I've been chatting with Robert Hayes, President and CEO of Calgary Sports and Entertainment, and watch for our next episode in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.